Right. Okay, let's move on to our final album.
That's done.
And this is called High Vibrations. It comes from the John Michie Collective.
Are you pronouncing it Mickey?
I think it's Mickey. Mickey?
Well, see, I had a boss, like, when I was younger. You probably remember it, actually. Remember I used to work in the... I don't know if it was
That
before.
old man's pub.
No. This was when I used to work... So it was whilst I was at school. I used to work in the Sunday markets through in Thainston.
Right, I don't remember that.
I don't know if I kind of really knew you back then, man.
No, probably not.
But my boss was called Hugh Michie.
Aye, so
He's Scottish. This guy's he's from North England, isn't he?
Aye, so when I worked in Aberdeen, there was a guy who worked at the roads department, and he was called John Michie. So I've just said his name the same as I would say that name, and he was just like an old Scottish guy who worked for the the roads department. Obviously not the same guy.
Well, who knows?
Amazed if it was. So I don't know the pronunciation, but I've gone with Mickey.
And that's probably how most folk would pronounce it. It's probably just a Keith thing, Mickey.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably the least interesting thing about it.
Yeah, that is. Sorry. It definitely is the least interesting thing about this album, and him.
Absolutely. So the John Michie Collective is a project by multi-instrumentalist and multimedia artist John Michie, who's based in the north of England. Right, calm down. Right.
Okay.
So
it's Bibby all over again.
It is Bibby all over. Still cracks me up. So this is a debut. I can't even talk. Right. This is a debut album from the JMC and is described on his website as taking inspiration from the psych stalwarts, including Pink Floyd, the Beatles, and the Velvet Underground. It's very much a psychedelic prog odyssey that combines elements of rock and roll, electronica, blues, world music, and more. So I was bemoaning how bland Black Pistol Fire album was there, but this album feels like a bit of a palate cleanser for me because it's anything but bland. There's so much going on over the 14 tracks that make up this album. What's your general thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I was really quite impressed with this album. His name had been buzzing about for quite some time because I think had he not previously submitted some of his material to the site, possibly ahead of the album release.
Yes, he sent. So after we reviewed Sophia by Valdo,
right.
I think so. Nunny Boy, David Nunny Boy, is quite active on Twitter, and he tagged us. So John Michie had put feelers out for people to promote the album to, and I think Nunny Boy tagged us in it. So he'd emailed us with, I think, the first single, which I'm not certain what that was, to be honest.
Quite a few singles.
It might have been Wish You Were Dead, but I can't remember. So he sent us that, and then there was a bit of back and forth, and he did send us the album in advance, but we just never got to it before it came out. So that's kind of so we did get it, and it could have been a sort of submission corner, but it feels more appropriate to be where it is, basically.
Absolutely.
But it's a very impressive piece of work.
It's I've got a lot of love for this album, man. I mean, I really didn't know what to expect. Obviously, as with kind of most of the albums that we cover, I listened to the album before I did any research, and as I said, John Michie's name had been kind of buzzing about for a little while, and I remember seeing on Facebook that he'd included Fantastic's first single, Ain't No Man With Money, on a playlist that he put together. So that inadvertently led me to believe that he was some sort of kind of southern gothic blues country artist. And although there are elements of that in this album, this piece is so much more, as you've kind of said. I've described it as a veritable smorgasbord of a multitude of different musical styles and influences. It's a heavily instrumental and textured piece that uses a wide variety of instrumentation, ranging from kind of swooning and soaring guitars, harmonicas, to synths, and I think even sitars. It's kind of interspersed with voice clips from what sound like old westerns and B-movies that are, for the most part, primarily used as a means of introducing the tracks. And on the occasions where John does sing, the vocals are often in the foreground and sound quite distant. And they're interlaid with various different effects and echoes. And for my money, it sounded quite similar to the type of thing that the Beta Band might have done back in the day.
Okay.
There was also numerous times where I was reminded of other bands or artists. For example, like the opening bars of the third track, Wish You Were Dead, as you said, may or may not have been released as a single previously. I know that he released quite a lot of singles before they released the album, but that song in particular reminded me of Iggy Pop's Nightclubbing.
All right, okay.
I felt as if it opened with this kind of similar sort of kind of drum beat, a discordant piano, and this really kind of shuffling, sleazy, sludgy feel to it. However, it takes a delightful left turn towards the last 10 seconds or so of the track, where it takes on this new, albeit brief, life as a kind of dancey techno number, which I just thought was really cool. And there's bits like that throughout the course of the album where it just kind of shoots off in a totally different musical direction.
Yeah, totally. I really like Wish You Were Dead, that tinkling piano. Like, it sounds like something out of it sounds like it's almost been played on a broken piano in like an old saloon or something.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then it's got like these squealing guitars, which are, I suppose, where the sort of psych element comes from. There are these guitars soloing over a lot of these tracks. And it brings that sort of psychedelic element, and it's weird because it's described as sort of taking elements of like Pink Floyd and the Beatles and stuff like that, but the first track, you would never really guess that, because the first track's almost like a Prodigy song. It's
the Mothership.
The Mothership, yeah. It reminds me of the song Spitfire by the Prodigy.
Yeah, man.
It's not quite as bombastic or explosive, but it's got a very similar groove to it, I suppose. And it's just a really, I mean, that's a really cool opening track. And then the next track is like a sort of acoustic song with woozy electric guitar all over the top of it, and it's got these bizarre dreamy vocals that sound like, it almost sounds like Liam Gallagher or Ian Brown. There's a sort of Manchester vibe to the way the vocals sound a wee bit, and that's not to say this sounds anything like Oasis, because it sounds nothing like Oasis or the Stone Roses, but although I suppose there probably are some similarities with the Stone Roses here and there. But it's just, I think it's cool how it is really varied, and it's really varied within all the tracks, but it all sounds like it's in part of the same album. Like, it doesn't sound, nothing sounds out of place, really, is what I'm trying to say, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. As I said, there are numerous kind of similarities to other kind of bands and artists. You might agree or disagree with this, but there was times where I was reminded of the type of thing that Frank Black has kind of done in the past as well. particularly on the likes of the Cult of Ray or Teenager of the Year album, on tracks like I'll Write Your Consolation, which is kind of towards the end of the album. It's probably, one of the kind of standout tracks for me.
Yeah.
It sounded very similar to the Adventure and the Resolution, which is in the Cult of Ray album. It's got a very similar kind of spacey feel to it. It has these kind of noodling guitars, kind of ebb and flow in and out of the track, and this really striking violin that accompanies the guitars, which I thought worked really, really well, really well. One of my favourite tracks in the album, however, has to be Escape from San Francisco. That is fucking epic, man.
Yeah, that's brilliant, isn't it?
It's so good. It's got this kind of real, I've described it as having a real kind of bluegrass feel to it initially, and described it how it effectively repeats this riff, which gets increasingly more textured and elaborate as time goes on. It first uses a guitar, then possibly a cello or double bass, and then the highlight of that track for me certainly is when he starts riffing using this kind of crazy jazz synth. I think synth or keyboard, and
an organ or something like that, isn't it?
Aye, it's probably an organ. I just thought it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I wish it could have gone on for longer because it's a fairly short track.
It's mental because the song is only 2 minutes long. I've said here it goes from Seasick Steve to The Doors, and it's only 2 minutes long.
Yeah, man, it's got a proper kind of Ray Manzarek kind of feel to it, doesn't it? I've described it there as having this real 70s psychedelic rock feel to it, but absolutely, yeah.
Aye, that's like that Escape from San Francisco and I'll Write Your Constellation that you mentioned already. Like, yeah, they're highlights. I quite like the Ballad of John Wayne as well. It's I find it funny that the song's called The Ballad of John Wayne, and then the only vocals are "Bang Bang, You're Dead. It's a long, long way home." I don't know why that just amuses me that all there is to say about John Wayne is that. But and then it's got that this kind of funny sample at the end, like you say, from like an old western or something, with this guy just screaming, "I killed that fat barkeep!"
Yeah, that's fucking ace.
And actually, there's a short bluegrass section at the end of that as well, which is like, I don't know, it's like 7 seconds long. It's really short, and I was like, oh, and then you kind of get that comes back on, it comes back with a vengeance on the start of Escape from San Francisco.
Yeah, it's a fantastic album. Like I said, I know you've mentioned kind of Mothership. You've mentioned Mothership before, how it's the kind of opening track, and I would completely agree. And I actually never thought of it as sounding similar to Prodigy Spitfire, but you're absolutely right. I've described it having this kind of really apocalyptic cinematic feel to it. Like, it sounds as if it's jumped straight from a movie.
Yeah.
And just a banger of an opening track. What other songs have you enjoyed, man?
I mean, they're all really, really interesting. I quite like Under the Stars, which starts with like it starts with Neil Armstrong's famous quote from the moon landings,
Yeah.
and then it's suitably kind of astral, I suppose, as the name would suggest. But then it kind of over time morphs into this like, it's almost like a floor filling dance like song in a way. I was struggling for how to describe it, but it feels really, really dancey. In a sort of odd kind of way. But yeah, so that one for me was really interesting, and I think in terms of the sort of psychedelic side of things, Penny Was Her Name has got a lot of there's a lot of Pink Floyd on that track.
Yeah.
Definitely very Dark Side of the Moon, in my opinion, anyway. And the closing track, Astral Projection, feels a little bit like It's almost like a cool down, like from the album. It sort of feels like it's sort of kind of just letting off steam until it just ends, and then there's the sample. You have a lot of talent, thank you, sir. Well, it's a guy saying you have a lot of talent, and the other guy saying thank you, sir. And it almost feels like a little pat on the back to himself on John Michie's part. And I'm not gonna jump that little bit of self congratulation because because the album really is something else, and it's really impressive just in terms of all the different elements to this, like all the different instruments that are going on, and yeah, it's a really cool album.
So, it's just him, isn't it? I say it's just him, but was it all played and recorded by him?
I'm not certain.
Not sure.
I haven't read too much into that, but the John Michie Collective, it is just him. But whether he's had any session musicians in to help with pulling this together, I don't know. But I suppose the fact that he's described as a multi-instrumentalist probably tells a story, and it probably was all him, or the majority of it was him. I also like that his record label is called Shabby Road Records. I think that's really funny.
Yeah, I was trying to find a bit more about Shabby Road's records, and apparently there was a Shabby Road Records in Ayrshire at one point.
Right, okay.
And there's also a podcast by the same name, so I think they do a similar thing to ourselves, actually. Just review new music and what have you. Or review old music, actually, I think.
All right, okay.
But there's no connection there.
Cool. What have you rated this in?
I've given it an 8 or a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I've given it a 9 as well. I think it's pretty good. Well, it's more than pretty good. It's very good.
It's very good. There's a lot of stuff to like, man. There's a lot of stuff to sink your teeth into, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so that was High Vibrations by the John Michie Collective.
Known for a long time, no use pretending. Don't stop.